speaker. And this person is a family man. He is a man of God, first and foremost. He believes strongly in family, he believes strongly in church and God principles and God value. And also, he's managed to climb his career ladder, and he is MD of Isipani. He's married with two beautiful children. Can I even say that? Beautiful children? Yeah, I'm gonna call your kids beautiful. Beautiful children, Nick and Josh. And his beautiful wife, Marjorie. And he is also on church leadership. So, guys, give a round of applause for Van Hansler.
Sounds like my mom. So.
It sounds like the mom. Well, you can sit. There we go. So listen, seeing that you're with us and that, why don't you just take a moment and just tell them a bit about yourself, a bit about your background, so they can understand.
Okay, so I'm definitely not a speaker in the sense of coming here to tell you a big story. I'm going to answer the questions as good as well as I can. And when I'm talking, if you want to interrupt, ask a question, please feel free to do so. I'll answer the questions as best I can. Just a bit of background. I grew up in a family with 3 boys. I'm the middle son. Both my parents are teachers. So I grew up in a very loving family, church-going family. So I had a very good upbringing. And then when I went to high school, I went to Belgium, went to the hostel, grew up there, learned a lot about the disappointment and then getting over disappointments and stuff. And the reason why I'm telling you all these things, and I'll expand a little bit more when I answer some of the questions, just to show you that I went to Cape Technicon, studied for 3 years, started working in the company as a student, and from there, for the last 26 years, I've been at the same company, worked my way up to that. I became MD 4 years ago. But I started off like any one of the people sitting out here. I didn't come from a family with a lot of money. My parents being teachers, we always were clean and our clothes weren't broken and full of holes and stuff. But we didn't wear branded clothing. We didn't grow up with a lot of money and go on expensive holidays and stuff. We were run-of-the-mill, middle-class family, and I had to work my way up. Got no favors from no one, studied, I worked on a farm when I was still at high school to raise money to pay for my own studies, or a portion thereof. My parents paid for the rest, but I worked my way to where I am today. And through the grace of God, it worked out very well.
Awesome. So guys, did you take out of that clean? That's for the guys that... Okay, listen, I'm going to dive straight into it, okay? Because we actually have a whole bunch of questions that I know we asked all these people as they entered the building. If they had any questions, they could ask you. And we even had questions prior to that. So, the first question I would like to ask you is, what made you think that you can actually excel in life in 3 areas, being your job, relationships, and church, when the norm or life as it is tends to say that life is a pie, and that in order to excel in one, you have to remove from the others, and being your job, your relationships and friendships, or being involved in church, which goes against actually what you did. Because you are managing director of Isipani, you are a family man. I know that you're a family man, and it's a firm belief that you have. And also, you're very involved with church. You even on the leadership of church. So,
yeah, for me, it's always been about balance. You will find there are seasons in your life. If I refer back to when I first started coming to church, Margie, my wife, we were still going out at that stage. She actually brought me to church, gave my heart to the Lord. But back then, I was still a youngster at Isipani. Back then it was called Van der States, the name changed in the meantime. But back then, I was a site foreman, and I would leave the house at 5 o'clock in the morning to pick up the people, to go to site. And very, very rarely did I get home during the week and work most Saturdays as well. But very rarely I would get home before 7, 8 o'clock at night. So it was long hours, and then you have to spend time working on a relationship, getting engaged and then getting married. So back then, the pie looked completely different to what it looks now. So back then I was working on a career, but I still went to church. I did my Bible study, worked on a relationship. Back then, Church on the Rock had these conferences. I couldn't be at church every single Sunday. I couldn't serve during the week because of the hours that I worked. But I still was involved with church. Whereas when we had conferences, for instance, the first 5, 6 years that I had those conferences, and that was the first 5, 6 years that I was at church, I was in charge of cleaning the toilets. And that was my job. Clean the toilets, make sure that everything was to the standard that Mark wants. And for those of you who serve in church, he sets a very high standard. But that was what I did. And I could add value there. Then, as I progressed and I became a foreman, more senior site foreman, suddenly I had people working underneath me or with me. So in upskilling those people, and for those of you who work in your jobs, I believe it's very important that you upskill the people that work for you. I'm a firm believer, and it might sound completely against everything you've ever heard. I'm a firm believer that you need to work yourself out of a job. And what I mean by that is, you need to upskill the people that works for you, that they can start doing the tasks that you do and that you're supposed to be doing, so that you free yourself up to be able to do jobs above what your pay grade is. If that makes sense. But the very important thing is, you can't delegate work and then not take responsibility for it. If you delegate work, it's still your responsibility because it's your job. You still need to make sure that that job is done to the same standard that you would have done it. And that's the thing. You need to teach people to be able to do the work to the same standard that you have with and that your company is happy with. Because then those people will take some of your work away, you can take some of the work away and make your boss look good. And eventually when they need to employ someone at that level above you, guess who they're going to pick? Not the guy who has nothing, they're going to pick you. So that's just from work side. But then, as I grew in my job, like I said, I had more free time, I could get more involved in church. Eventually I started doing like the maintenance at church because I'm in the building industry. Spent many hours doing evenings, Saturdays, getting some guys in doing stuff for church, rolling. We did the foyer, we did the kids' church. Most of this was done, we did a bit of work at the back there. So then it changed, that part changed again. So then I had the opportunity with the skills that I've learned in my job to invest back in the church. So then my pie for church, involvement in church became a little bit bigger. And with that, I didn't spend less time at work, still spent the same effort at work, but less time properly. So because there were people that could do what I used to do 2 or 3 years before that. And every time you go and you grow, that it's a balance. You need to realize that it won't look exactly the same. It's not a third, and you're trying to balance it. Sometimes for a week or two, I need to be at work at 5 in the morning and I come back late, or I need to go through to Cape Town a couple of days a week. It happens. And then the family understands it because it's not the norm. And they don't feel that they've been left behind. Church, Mark and Jan knows that we committed, we there, we here, we do the type of things, messages every 2 weeks. But if I can't do it, and I say this week I can't, they know that somewhere down the line I'm going to do 2 services a week in a row, for instance. So it's balance and it's communication. You need to communicate.
Yeah. to my understanding, what you're saying is it's more fluid, like a river, than rigid, like this is it and this is all you have.
Exactly. Someone said this morning, it's like if you're the harbour master and you see all the boats coming in on the horizon, you need to pick which one is the one that needs your attention right away to get into the harbour. No use you looking and focusing on the one right at the back when there's three others that's going to crash into each other or come in. You need to prioritize, you need to know what is the priority at that specific time.
Okay, next question. What challenges did you have to overcome in the beginning as you were finding your footing, such as mental or even physical challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, look, in the beginning, work-wise, obviously the long hours that we worked was a challenge. But when you push through and you do something that you enjoy, and I think it's very important that you get a job that you actually enjoy doing, then it's not an effort to get up in the morning. Even though I'm not a very big morning person, I can stay up very late. I'm not really a very chirpy morning person. I get up and I do what I need to do, but it's not my first choice. But for me, in the beginning, I think that was the reality, is the long hours that we worked many Saturdays. I not refused to, but I organized my things that I didn't have to work on a Sunday, because I do believe it's very important to have that day off and to spend it with God and with your family and in church. So for me, it's always been a thing that I really seldomly worked in 25 years on a Sunday.
Just based on everyone's giggle, I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't morning people.
And there's nothing wrong with it, but you need to organize your things so that you don't need to do important things in the morning.
Yeah. Now you just said how you work that you don't work on a Sunday. Okay. For you, why is church so valuable?
For me, I was fortunate, and maybe it's going to take a while. It's going to be a bit of a long story now. But when I grew up in a family, being the middle child. My oldest brother was a very good sportsman, played provincial cricket from when he was under 9, he played for the under 13 World cricket team already, and he played provincial cricket every single year, played Western Province provincial rugby at school, and then after school he went to go and study at university. He was also a straight A student, by the way. So he studied, became an actuary while he was busy playing provincial cricket after school. Played for Poland, played for the Free State, played with Hansi Premier, Alan Dawn, all those guys in the same team. So he spent about 5-6 years after he finished his studies playing county cricket overseas, and then 6 months there, 6 months here. So he was a very good sportsman. My younger brother was a very good sportsman as well, but he played rugby. So he played for Poland and then went overseas to New Zealand to go and play there. From there he went over to Ireland to play in Ireland. And both of them, then after like 6-7 years of doing it, came back to South Africa and then started their careers. Mine was completely different. I wasn't a straight A student. I barely got 60% at school. And it wasn't because of the lack of trying, but I just worked out. But I wasn't that great at
So guys, it can be done.
That's why I love Gerrit, and you all know Gerrit. I didn't do well at school in accounting, but my parents forced me to do accounting. Barely got 50% for it. After I got 15% for it in grade 10. So my parents then allowed me to do the job. But again, I believe in employing people that are better than me in all the areas where I'm not good at. And that's how you build your company. But apart from that, the question was,
why is church so valuable and important?
okay, so I've told you now about my brothers. So when I played cricket and stuff, I always played first team, but I never ever played provincial in any of the age groups. In under 13, there were 15 guys, and 2 had to fall out for the 13 to be selected, and I was one of them. Under 15, there were 17 guys, 15 got selected, and I was one of the 2 that fell out. Under 19, exactly the same thing. So I never got the opportunity to play provincial cricket. But looking back, if I played it, then I would have been going overseas, then I would have gone overseas and followed my brothers. and I wouldn't have been where I am today. So looking back, I could see what God's plan and purpose for my life was, and that was to go and study, work for Isipani, and have the influence that I have at church. And for me, I at a very early age realized that God had a plan and purpose for my life, and I was fortunate enough to realize what that plan and purpose was. It wasn't nice at the time, but looking back, I can see why God did the things that He did. And with that, I can be a king in the house. I can make a difference at Church and Rock. And with making a difference, God makes a difference in my life. So it's a principle of sowing and reaping. It's what you sow is what you reap. So I invest in church, and I invest in my life, I invest in my relationships, my kids, my wife, and that is why it's important.
I've got 2 questions now, and they go together, okay? The first one is, do you have any non-negotiables in your week or in your life? Okay. And the second one is, what were some of the practical things you or your wife put into place in your life that you believe had a great impact or effect over your life today, be it relationship, financial?
I'm going to ask you again what the question is.
It's okay. That's why I'm here.
Non-negotiables for me is when we involve, I don't miss church, and that includes morning and evening. Obviously, when we go away for a weekend, we can't be here, but the non-negotiable is if we involve both Marge, myself, and the kids are in church, and they don't have a choice whether they come with or not, they will be here. So that for me is very important. The other very important thing, and it's something that I started doing about a year and a half, 2 years, well, actually a bit longer, before COVID, that year before COVID somewhere. I stopped looking at any emails and stuff in the mornings when I woke up, or when I wake up. And it got to a point at one stage where the first thing I would do when I wake up was pick up the phone and then start going through emails and stuff that came through during the night or early morning. And I stopped doing it because it started interfering with my quiet time in the morning. And that for me is non-negotiable. I don't miss quiet time in the morning. For me, you have to do it to start your day well. So that's a non-negotiable. Practical things for me, and it probably relates to just general life ethics or life lesson is, I grew up, my dad always said, if you haven't got respect for time, you will have respect for nothing. And the reason that is, if I've got a meeting with Kaylin and I'm late, then I'm actually not respecting him. If I don't respect that time, and his time, then I don't respect him. And we grew up like that. My dad always said, early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable. And that was it. And if you wanted the proper hiding, come late. So that's how we grew up, and that has stood me in very good stead throughout my life. In business, everywhere you go, people respected me on time. So we also grew up, if we had to be somewhere, my dad always said, make sure that you're there in time, so that if you get a flat tire on the way there, you still have time to fix your tire and wash your hands before you step into the meeting. It sounds silly, but if you think about it, if you get there 20 minutes before the time, before a meeting in your work, you will have time to prepare, you'll have time to pray to God and just ask Him. And it's something that I do. Practical thing that I do is before I go into a meeting, I'll ask God for wisdom, I'll ask Him for supernatural favor, and ask Him for Him to open my eyes to see what is happening in the meeting. And the amount of times that I've sat in very important meetings for us as a company, where I knew what the question was going to be before the guy even asked it, is, I can't even tell you how many times it happens. And that's God just opening those doors for you. And you can answer because, and you look confident as well doing it. And that's just God imparting into your life. So I'll really suggest or encourage you, make sure you're on time, that you've got enough time to prepare properly for meetings, that you're calm and elected when you walk into it. So that's a practical thing for me, it works for me.
And as a couple, did you put anything in place?
Yeah, Marge and I, she runs a CrossFit from home, and I obviously work and I get home and I go and exercise, and that's the other thing, very important. If you fit, you don't need to be top fit to go and run a marathon, but if you fit, you work better, you get less grumpy with people. When I start getting grumpy with people, and my wife especially, I know I haven't trained enough, or I haven't been training for a while. So get out there. Don't need to do it in the mornings, we do it in the evenings, but get out there and go and do exercise. You don't need to, you can go and walk around the block, but just do something. Walk around.
There we go.
Very good, yeah.
Park run is open, everyone. Free advertisement right there.
Yeah. Okay, so for Marge myself, she runs the CrossFit at home. So her last class only finishes at 7:30. So when I get home, I don't eat before she finishes, because we as a couple, we eat together, the kids eat with us. So, and that for us is family time, spending it around having dinner. So that's one of the practical things that we've put in place. The other thing is also, I believe you need to have people that you trust enough, that you give the authority to speak into your life. And Marge is one of those people. So when she sees that something's not well, or she thinks that I'm not in the right direction or whatever, she's got I've given her the permission to speak, and I'm not allowed to get upset when she does. It's difficult sometimes, but I've got a couple of people, it's about 5 people in my life that are in different areas of my life that I allow to speak into my life with, knowing that it is for the best and not trying to be funny.
There's two things that just stood out. The first one being that you let them speak in, but you may not get upset with them. And for me, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I'll be like, oh, speak into my life. And they say it, and they're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to tell you what I
So just on that, you're not allowed to get upset with everything. You can go.
Oh, you can go solve something else. Go solve something else.
Which I do, but not there.
And then also, you said you have about 5 people. So you're very selective with who actually speaks into your life.
So I've got Marge that speaks, and she can speak on anything. Mark as well, Jan as well, but they go together. So
combo pack.
And you know you can get an honest truth, straight answer. It's not going to be beaten about. I don't do well with people going, just tell me straight, don't like me, it's fine.
Is what it is.
We don't need to ride together, but we'll be amicable together, and it's fine. Not everyone can get along with everyone.
Yeah.
So for me, Mark and Jan, definitely. Marge Gerrit, that you all know, he's our financial director and one of our shareholders, partner in the business with me. So he's got the right to speaking, and then I've got one other guy at work, and so Mark and Jan and Marge can speak into the area, Gerrit speaks at work, and then I've got another guy at work. He doesn't believe in God, he says he's an atheist, but he's got the right, and I've given him the right to say, he's one of our directors and shareholders as well. So I've given him the right to say, if my ego, if ever there's an ego or a way of speaking to people that might not, because I know he'll openly and honestly tell me when I don't think that was right or that was right. Because even though he says he's an atheist, he's got a very solid moral compass. Yeah. So for me, he's allowed to speak in that area, and with him, I'll take what he says and I'll sift through what I believe is right and wrong, and then at least someone keeps me honest. Because it's very easy when you get to a certain position of power and in your job, we might just not handle it correctly in the beginning, especially. I've often seen, as soon as guys get authority, they may not know exactly how to handle it. and there might be a time where they need to just be guided, and he's got the right to do that.
Just going back to your wife, we have a question here from someone saying, do you have a joint bank account with her, yes or no? Now, if that's too personal, then that's fine. But you did also mention something along the lines of she runs her own business, she runs her own gym. So, if you want to.
We don't have a shared bank account, but we do. She runs her own business, like I said. My money comes into the money that is buying based comes into my account. But then we've got a Discovery credit card that I put money into, and that money is to buy food and all the other stuff. And we've both got a card for that. But we don't have a joint bank account. Not really a reason for it. It's
just the way it is. You both have bank accounts, and I still have bank accounts.
That is it. And you've got one in the middle.
It's such a hassle to do. How do you make time for everything to fit when work takes so much time? So you have time for your family, you have time for church, and work, but work takes just so much time. How do you make time for things to fit?
Work does take a lot of time, but work takes time, and the way we run our business, and it might not be the same for everyone, because everyone works at different places. I believe that, yes, work takes a lot of time, but people need to work from, and we started off by 7 on the sites, and we started at 8 o'clock in the office. So for me, again, people need to start work at 8, and we work until 5, 5:15. And very often, that is my working hours, and I must get stuff done during those working hours. I also don't, I've got some practical things that I do to save time, and to make more time available to myself. Like the one thing that I've learned, and it was actually a previous boss of mine that told me, if you look at your office, I don't know how many of you've got office and sit down at the desk and work, but in the week to follow, just have a look and see how many times you touch a piece of paper on your desk. Because it's something you pick up and it's not a lacquer thing to deal with, you put it there. Half an hour later you pick it up and then you put it over there. Calculate the amount of time that you waste moving a piece of paper around on your desk. That's not something that you want to do, the admin, boring admin stuff. Just get it done. It needs to be done anyway. So if it's there, do it. And that's hard. And honestly, I save myself a lot of time not moving papers around on my desk. And the other thing is, I never let stuff stand over for the next day. So if stuff comes in, I need to do it, I do it. I finish it, file it, take it away. So if you come to my office, even though we run a business, a fairly big business, so we do about 1.2, 1.3 billion rand turnover a year. We run 16 construction sites at any given time. There's about 120 people working for us, monthly salary people, another 400 wage earners, and then about 700 casuals. So there's a lot of people working for us. But you can come to my office tomorrow morning before I fall in. You won't find newspapers lying around my desk because I finish it before I leave the office. And sometimes I'll work until 6 or 7 to get it done, but that's the exception almost.
Tying into that, we also have a question saying, when you have such a high demanding job, how do you make sure that you actually find that downtime or that time to wind down?
Exercise works for me, works very well. I can be as stressed as I want, or as stressed as you can be. Get home, get dressed, don't cycle, and when I get back half an hour and a half later, I'm relaxed. Enough sleep obviously helps. I can stay awake easily until 12, 1 at night, but I don't wake up. So I wake up and I get up. But for me, I actually need to be disciplined to go to bed at 10. Otherwise, I'll sit there and I'll watch Netflix and binge on Netflix. And then the next morning you get up and you're not at your peak. So you need to have that discipline to go to bed and have a good night's rest. For me, I think that's very important.
Guys, that TV series episode will be there tomorrow.
And the other thing that I also found, I don't know how many of you still watch TV, normal TV, or any of these things, but my kids, for some other reason, love banana push. Yeah.
And so do they.
Apparently. So yes, I don't know, if you want to save yourself 20 minutes a day, record it and forward past all the adverts. Well, even better. The amount of time we waste watching TV and looking at adverts, if you count that, I promise you can save yourself 20 minutes, half an hour every single day to do something else.
Funny enough, I actually spend a lot of time on YouTube, and they have premium, and $60 and you can skip all the ads. And I did the math of all the 5-second ads that you're actually watching, just waiting for that X, so you can skip it. And I was like, no, you know what, I'll pay $60 and I'll just skip all the ads.
Yeah, because now they've actually got 2 ads running right behind each other.
I wouldn't know if I skipped all the ads.
Well, that's all that.
The person asks, what are practical ways to invest more into your future financially, besides tithing, giving, and offering, and have a savings account? So besides all that.
Okay, so the non-spiritual answer.
Skip everything.
Those things are the most important by a long way.
Now, why would you say that?
Because I believe that that is what God wants from us. And if we are faithful in those things, God will look after us. He will look after your finances. He will look after your job. He will look after your company. If I can, let me answer the first question first, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
And just remind me, come back to you. The same guy that I've allowed to speak into my life. I'll tell you a story about him. But anyway, so for me personally, and I think it's a personal thing for each and every one, I'm not a financial advisor, so I believe in tithes. Yeah, I believe in tithes and offerings, and that has been my financial freedom to say on a day-to-day basis. But then investment, I do believe you need to invest. For me personally, I've got a pension fund, I've got a life insurance policy for my own loan. And we as a company, as shareholders, we invest in property because we're in the business. So, and that is the investment for me, is I've got shares in the company, so all the free money for me I spend in my own company, buying more shares, and then through that having more of a share in the property development that we do as well. So it's different for everyone, but I'll definitely encourage you to have a pension fund that is big enough, and you can't start too early with it. Really, the sooner you start, the better. Pension fund, life insurance policy is what you can afford, and tithes and offerings.
Just talking about pension funds very quickly. I remember when I was starting, I did a budget, and I was like, I don't have room for a pension fund. And then the person who was actually doing it with me said, listen, if you just start today, that's perfect. So even if you just put 100 Rand aside, because you can always change the number later, but just that 100 Rand every month will be something that you're willing to put aside if you start like in next year. Because the funny thing with next year is always next year becomes next year becomes next year.
Harold has done a tithe message about compound interest. I don't know if you've heard it. And I don't know if you know what compound interest is. It's when you get interest on your interest. So once you invest and you get interest, say for instance you've got 100 Rand, and through the year you've made 10% interest, and now I've got 110. So the next year you're getting interest on 110 Rand, not 100 Rand. And that builds up, and at a certain point that just goes through the roof. So not a savings account will do the same thing, but the interest you get there is just less. So you do get places where you can invest, where compound interest will be your friend for many years to come.
Now I must remind you to go back, please.
You asked me why I believe in investing and tithes and offerings. So the same guy, Grant Robertson, who I've given permission to speak in my life, he's one of our shareholders and directors, and many of you may or may not know, but when the church built, we built through Isipani. So Isipani, our company carries the cost, and then once the miracle offering happens, then the church pays back Isipani. So we fund the construction for a couple of months, and then we get paid by the church after miracle offering. But every single year, when we don't have work, and as soon as we start building for the church, work just flows in like you can't believe. I promise you, it is every single. At the moment, we're struggling for work, and it's just the times that we're in after COVID and everything. We know that God has got it, but I can promise you now, as soon as we start building at Wellington, which we really have to soon, I can promise you work will start coming in. And why I'm telling you this is, this Grant Robertson guy, we sat in a meeting a good couple of years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, and also we didn't have enough work, waiting for work to come in. So he said, doesn't your church want to build something? And he said, because every time we build for your church, then the work comes in. So God honors when you invest into his church, into the storehouse. God honors it, and he will bless you, and he will bless your company. Because remember, if you earn 10,000 rand, for instance, and you faithful in your tithes, God promises in his word that he will open the floodgates of heaven. So if you bring your 1,000 rand to the storehouse every month, and then you give over and above as well, that's what gets multiplied. And you would have heard the message many times. But where's that multiplication can come from? If God doesn't bless your company for them to be able to pay you more money, how will your salary increase? So it's either you're going to get promoted in your company, and you can make a bigger difference, or your company must be blessed so much that they can afford to pay more. So if you're in a company and you're faithful with your tithes and offerings, God will bless that company as well. He has to.
What advice would you give someone who is striving to reach the top of their company or their business or their workplace, or even if they're just starting that journey and that ladder?
When you guys started our company, and I can just speak from what I believe works for us, I always tell them, you need to use common sense. And when you make a decision with that common sense, make the best decision you've got with the information that you've got. And the second thing is, have the guts to make a decision. Don't sit there and just be part of the furniture, because you'll find 100 people that can do that. If you want someone who makes a difference, it's the guy that makes the decision.
Yeah.
But make a decision to the best of your ability with the knowledge and the information that you've got at that time. And I can promise you, no one will blame you for it. If you've got the information, that's all the information that you can gather, and you need to make a decision. And before you sit there, everyone is make a decision, stand up. You can be judged by your decision. With the information, if you've got all the information, chances are you're going to make a good decision. And that will excel you. If you make the wrong one, at least you've made a decision. And it shows leadership. So for me, that's the one thing. Honesty, I think honesty is non-negotiable. If you've made a mistake, be open and honest. Go to your boss, say, look, sorry, this is what happened, this is why it happened. I've learned this lesson out of it. Chances are your boss will respect that. And if he doesn't, then he's not a good leader. So chances are you will be his boss one day, I promise you. So for me, that's the other thing. Diligence, being on time, we've spoken about that. And don't, with honesty also goes work ethic. Don't trample or badmouth one of your colleagues to get promoted, because the Bible says God gives promotion. So you just do the best that you can do it excellently, and God will promote you through the ranks. if that is what God has planned and purpose for you, man cannot stop it. That's what God can do.
During your rough times and during your dark times, how do you stay motivated?
Look, I think being founded in God definitely helps. I find praise and worship definitely helps. Having those kind of people, like I've said, when I struggle at work, I'll discuss it with Marge. But sometimes she's also not maybe in a good space. But then I'll speak to Mark and Jan, or Mark. Gerrit is always there at the office. So work-wise, I'll do that. Spiritually, Mark definitely, and Gerrit as well. So I'm fortunate that I've got those kind of people around.
So you actually just get alongside people.
I make sure, and I honestly I believe that you need to surround yourself with people that you can trust. Those kind of people. But then in your workplace, I also believe that you need to surround yourself with people that are better than you, because that forces you to become better.
And last question is, if you have been treating your life as if it was a pie and it wasn't fluid like we spoke about, and now we sing here tonight and we realize that we've been treating it as a pie, and we want to now make a change, okay? What would you say is the next step? What would you say is the next thing we should do from having this moment of realization of, oh, okay, I've been going about this wrong? How do I?
For me, it's always putting God first, and knowing what God's plan and purpose for your life is. If you read Matthew 3, verse 6 verse 33, it says, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be added." So for me, if you realize that you've been doing it wrong, seek God first. Ask Him for wisdom. God says in His Word, if you lack wisdom, ask for it, and He will give it to you. And you'll get a double portion as well. So for me, it's putting God first. And that's one of those non-negotiable things. Put God first. Find out what His plan and purpose for your life is if you don't know yet, and then align yourself with that. And to give an example, for instance, before I became managing director, I became a director in 2012, and then only in 2016 did I become managing director. But in 2014, the company was looking at expanding and branching out into Namibia as well. So at that time, our managing director offered me a managing director post in Namibia, and they wanted to open a branch there. But because I knew what God's plan and purpose for my life was, and that is to be in the house, being at Church on the Rock, being a leader at Church on the Rock, being a king in the house where financially you provide into the house. And for me, I knew that wasn't from God. Yeah. So I checked all of those things. And for me, yes, I would have become a managing director and it would have been great, but wouldn't have lined up with what God had planned and purposed to me. And I didn't go there. I didn't take the post, or the job. So for me, I stayed, knowing fair well that the guy who was managing director at the time was only 3 years older than me, and I probably would never get a chance to be a managing director at Isipani, at Cape Town or in Paul. Turns out 2 years later, I did become managing director. Wow. Because I was faithful to what God had promised. And at the time, I didn't know that it was going to happen. I didn't think it would ever happen. But I knew that God had put me in that place, and that God He had it, and it's where He came out, and He did.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming. Yes. No.
I wrote a couple of things down. I just want to make sure that we spoke about it.
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
So the first thing I said was know God's plan and purpose, and we've spoken about that, and then align yourself with it. I spoke about wasting time moving papers on your desk. The other thing that I think is very important is to plan properly. Plan your life, plan your day. Too many people, I think, I believe, they go into the day and they don't really know what they're going to do for the day. But also when you do a job at your workplace, plan it properly so that you do it once and you do it correctly. Because you'll find many people will just jump in, do it, and then stuff it up, and then they need to go back because they were too hasty in the beginning, because there wasn't time to do it properly. You'll always find time to do it a second and a third time if you don't do it right the first time. But very seldom do people just sit back, just have a look at it, plan it properly, and then do it once. But there's always time to go and do it again, but you never find the time to plan it in the first place. So spend the time in the beginning, plan your stuff, plan your work, plan your day, and you will have enough time for doing everything you need to do. I think that's very important as well. We've spoken about that. We've spoken about work yourself out of a job, ask for wisdom. We've spoken about the other thing that is also very important is you must also realize that every time that you say yes for something, you're saying no to something else. So I get invited a lot to functions and different work-related things, but I need to decide where I go, where I don't. Because if I get invited to a work function on a Thursday evening out in Cape Town, I know that I'm saying no to watching my kids play sports because they play squash on a Thursday evening. So for me, I don't commit myself to go to start after working hours on a Thursday night because then I know I'm taking time away from my kids. So every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else. So that's very important as well when it comes to church and family life. I never, or very seldom, will I accept something that's going to interfere with church on a Sunday. It's maybe the times that we're not here is when Marge and myself or the kids, we take them away, we spend time and we just recharge our batteries to spend time together. So that's also important. We've spoken about employing people that are better than you because and the reason is they will free you up to do other things. And then if you read 2 Timothy 1 verse 16, it speaks about a guy called Businessperson. Now I've done a tithe message one morning about Businessperson, and the Apostle Paul, actually, this guy, he helped and get the Apostle Paul safe and brought him stuff during his time in prison. So he was that kind of guy that I spoke about, like Mark and Jared and the other guys. So even the Apostle Paul had a guy that spoke in his life and that had his back in all areas of his life. So I do believe it's very important to have something like that. And then the other thing is just short breakaways. We, as a family, 2 weekends ago, Marge and myself went away for a weekend to Coldplay. It's not far, but when we go there, we switch our cell phones off. We don't look at our cell phones. We just spend time together. And I think that's also very important. It's very seldom that we actually do go on our own. As a couple, we've also decided that we will never go on holiday without our kids. So if we can't afford to take the kids with, we don't go. Practical things is also when we get invited to things, like for instance a weekend away with friends, if they say that the kids can't come, then we don't go. Because if our kids aren't welcome, then why should we go? So we would do it. So we like spending time as a family.
So you have a moment of being in the present.
That's great.
Wow. I think we all do with a bit of that sometimes.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that I've got. So I don't know if there's any other questions. Hopefully yes. He must come closer.
Okay, wait. I'll go to him. I'll go back in front.
Yes, so you mentioned that you were aspiring for 20-something years. How do you know that the company that you're working at is worth staying for in the long run?
When I started at Isipani, they were still a much smaller company, but they had a very good name in the the business, in the industry. So I'm not sure what industry you are, but you'll know how good your company is rated in that industry. Now, Isipani at that time, as a medium-sized company, was rated as one of the best in the Western Cape. So for me, it was always the thing that I wanted to become the best I can. I always wanted to become a director at a company. And for me, it was if I had to go to another company, because I couldn't become a director at Isipani, I would have had to go to a weaker company. And for me to become a director at a weaker company was less attractive than working my way and staying with Isipani. That was a very strong company, but also had a very good name. So that's the one thing. You need to judge in your industry where your company is rated. And the other thing is also, I believe that God has placed each and every person where they are for that season where they are there. Not to say that you need to stay there forever, but you might be speaking life into the person there that really needs it. So, yeah, you need to figure out where God wants you and what your company, how good they are in the industry. Yeah. I hope it answers your question.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Okay, just one last thing. Sorry. What you also, and it's not on your question, but I've got to say it earlier, is I started off at Isipani when I was a student in 1995. I actually wrote down the timeline. But I started off, and it also has to do with planning your life. So I started off there as a student in 1995. After I finished my studies, I became a foreman, doing small little sites in 1997. And then by 2003, I was doing bigger sites, and I had guys working under me, and I was running the bigger sites for the company. But then, so then March and I got married. Well, we got married in 2001, and back then, the first 2 years, I was still working long hours, a long time away from the house. But then, when I started doing the bigger jobs, then my time started becoming more regular, where I got home. Well, I could organize my things that I didn't have to work every Saturday, and I organized my things that I could be home 2 evenings in a week, knowing that I'll leave at 5:15 and I'll be home at 6. Because the other guys would look after the site for those intermediate days. So then we decided to have kids. But only then, when we knew that our time was of such that we could raise a kid properly. And if we had to have a kid straight after we got married, March would have been a total wreck, because I would never have been at home. I wouldn't have been able to help her in the evenings, because I would have been up at 5. I would have been back at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, sometimes later. So it wouldn't have worked practically. So 2004, Nick was born. In 2006, I became a complex manager. So that was another position where then I had more control over my time even, because then I was running 5 sites, but I had a woman running the sites. So I just had to make sure that they were sorted out. But then I could actually get home earlier. And then we decided to have a second kid. So then Josh was born in 2007. But then what I actually wanted to say is in 2010, not the previous managing director, the guy before him, they went on a Oscar, and it was decided that I would become the next managing director, and I would then work for 5 years under his guidance for the next 5 years. And then in 2015, I became managing director. So at that time, I was 35, I think, more or less. So I would become managing director, or 32, and I would become a managing director at 37, more or less. So things happened. He left the company. Well, him and the other shareholders had a fight, and he left the company. And he left me there after promising me that I would become the next managing director. Left me there, and the other guys took over, 4 of them. So one of them, because they were only shareholders, became managing director. So suddenly, from thinking I'm becoming the next managing director, I had to work under this guy. And then in 2012, we became directors and shareholders, but he was still the managing director. So for 5 years, I had to work under him, and I had to make him look good, while he had the position that I actually thought was mine. So disappointments will happen in your career. It's how you deal with it. Sometimes you just need to work and make someone else look good for you to be able to get promoted one day. So it's not nice. It's certainly not the way you want or see your career going, but stuff happens. And if I look back now, even that was for the best. We went through a time where the people started getting restless and stuff because of this other guy who left. And it was actually a good thing that someone that wasn't a partner at that stage became the managing director. So looking back at it, it all worked out well. But sometimes in your job, you need to work to make someone else do good. And that's actually what I want to say. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming. I think we could give him a round of applause. I'm sure every single person thinks something. Guys, we are going to be having free coffee in the foyer again. Raymond will be around, so if you do have a question and you weren't able to actually ask it, or you didn't want to ask it out loud or anything like that, you can approach Raymond and just ask him personally. He will be floating around in the front. Thank you for coming. You guys are awesome, amazing. Make sure you grab that free coffee. And yeah, have an amazing week further.